Hello, everyone, and welcome to Integration Downunder November meeting. We've got one more left in the year, and just to give you a hint of what we're looking at for next month is we're probably going to do, instead of a webinar, we'll do a meeting, and that means that everybody can be unmuted, and we'll do a ask any question type thing. And I'm trying to get one of the newest members of the Logic Apps team, who happens to be based here in Melbourne at the moment, along to that to answer some questions around some of the Logic Apps, the new Logic App stuff. So we've got our organizing committee, which is Martin in Perth, who says he's working hard tonight, so he can't make it. Dan in Brisbane, Renee from Sydney, who's also stuck at work. Wagner in Auckland, who's done his first flight trip of the year, which is a very amazing feat, because it used to be you do a flight trip a week almost.
That's true.
And myself here in Melbourne, and I haven't done any, and bye my frequent flyer status. Okay, let's get on. Tonight's speaker is Wagner, and he's going to be talking about a lap around Logic Apps and looking at the VS Code extension. A couple of things I'll mention in the meantime that if you haven't heard, they've got a new VS Code extension for Azure Functions that lets you take a Open API spec or Swagger, and it will generate the function project for you. And so it creates the models and stuff based on the Swagger and stuff. Looks pretty neat. I saw it on the last of the Function Apps Live event. But without any more ado, we will hand over to Wagner. I need to stop sharing my screen.
Just let me start sharing mine. Just give me 1 second. Good old Zoom. And share my screen. All right. So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And good morning for good measure. I don't know from where everyone is coming. Thanks for joining another Integration Downunder. And as Bill said, today we're going to be talking about the new VS Logic Apps VS Code extension, right? We're actually going to explore a little bit the Logic Apps runtime. And I found a whole lot of documents online and distill some of that information to help us to understand a little bit more what we have there. As the usual, a little bit more about me. If that works, there we go. So I'm the integration practice lead at Theta, right? And also a Microsoft Azure MVP as Bill, and then really the focus on integration, but we've been looking at a whole lot of other things as well. I'm one of the Auckland Connected Systems user group co-organizers. So I run that user group here in Auckland, and one of the co-organizers of the Integration Downunder. If you wanted to know a little bit more about me, or if you wanted to get in touch, you have my Twitter account there. I'm relatively active on Twitter. You have my personal email and my Logic App. My Logic App and my blog that talks a lot about Logic App, but has been quiet for some time. I think that topic is probably going to spark a couple of new blog posts, so keep looking at that. For the agenda today, what we're planning is a little introduction to what this Logic Apps runtime is and means for us. Then talk a little bit about some models that this a new runtime introduced and what is the difference between them. Think about have a good look at VS Code extension, right? And hopefully going to spend some quality time there. Then we can see Logic Apps running locally, but how to publish that to the cloud. And we're going to take a sneak peek on the Logic Apps preview in the portal that is being launched, I think, last week or something like that. Then after that, I'll give you a set of the reference material if you're interested in read more. Okay, so let's start with introducing the Logic Apps runtime. The idea of that is similar to what we had with functions a little while ago and to API management to extent, is having Logic Apps now running anywhere. So because it is now based in as the Azure Function extensibility, you actually going to be running as part of the Azure Function runtime. It's kind of a specialization of the Azure Function runtime, and going to allow you to run both on Azure Cloud and as a container on premises and the other clouds. That opens like a huge size of new opportunities to use Logic Apps, right? Now you choose the type of resilience because since the Azure Functions runtime stores all the information about the Logic Apps into a storage account. You decide if you wanted if that logic storage account is going to be just like local redundancy or zone redundancy. So you choose how you're going to make sure that redundancy is going to pan out. You choose the computing to a point, right? Because there is a minimum requirements to run that, but based on that, you can scale out and scale down as you need. And you're going to leverage from app services. And a couple of things that you always have trouble with Logic Apps, that was, for example, exposing that with a custom domain or having different types of security and things like that. You're now going to be able to get that within Logic Apps because it's you taking that for the container that it's running, that is the app services. So more and more, your integration workflow starting to be part of your application compared to what we have before, which was usually you have the development team running and doing everything, and then you have the integration team somewhere else doing those Logic Apps, and they kind of have to meet in the middle. Now you have the ability to get people working kind of on the same space and actually working together and with a much easier packaging. So from the Logic Apps models, we have two types of models, right? This Azure function, this Logic Apps runtime introduced two types of models. We have now the stateful Logic Apps. That is kind of the Logic Apps that we know and love so far, that it keeps the stage in a storage. And by that, it means that each one of the actions that is being executed and the triggers that are being fired and the trigger history and all of that is kept in this case in storage. And because of that, you can see that, you can review, right? But also that allows a submission because you have the original trigger for that. So you have a lot more resilience on that one because if something happens on the logic gap in the middle of the process because of a transient fault, and you should be able to re-execute that logic app since you have all the states, all the steps that is required for that. That solution, the stateful logic app, can be kept running for up to a year, right? So you can have like a long running process running to up to a year. And it supports all the triggers and actions from the managed connections, which means that all the triggers that you have today on managed connections, like the Outlook triggers and things like that, you'll be able to use with the stateful logic apps, right? So as I said, it's pretty much the logic apps that you know and love today. Just to complete that picture, we have the run history enabled by default. So on a stateful logic app, you're going to see all that state and that run history. So you can come back and take a look at what was happening with the logic app. In comparison, the stateless logic apps, all the state only exists in memory. And because of that, you don't have the ability to do resubmission, right? So the caller is now responsible for resubmit. But with since everything is kept in memory, you have much more. You have a performance gain on that. Those stateless logic apps can run for up to 5 minutes, right? So it's like the maximum time that it can be leaving. And it only supports actions from managed connections. The only triggers that is supported is the triggers that comes out of the box from the built-in triggers, which is the usual HTTP recurrence and things like that. So you're not able to use one trigger that is in the managed connections, according to documentation. And although the run history is not enabled by default, you can enable that if you need to. There is another difference between stateful and stateless logic apps based on how the nesting behavior of two logic apps happen. So that kind of that table kind of summarized that information. And when you have like stateful and stateful, both the parent and the child are stateful logic apps, then you have the same things that you had before, right? So is asynchronous or synchronous based on your decision, right? That means that it can distribute a whole lot of other executions and then collate them back at the end. When you have stateful logic apps, but the parent or as a parent, but the child workflow is stateless, then the stateful logic apps is going to trigger, but then wait for the execution to come back, right? So that means that is it's only going to go to the next one when the child responds. When you have a stateless logic app as a parent and a child workflow as a stateful, then it's synchronous. The stateless is actually going to be running and only going to try to execute anything else after it receives the response back. And the stateless to stateless is trigger and wait, as I said. So on those two cases, you can actually on stateful to stateless and stateless to stateless, you can like a run and receive the things back, but you don't have the option to make it synchronous or not. And the stateless with stateful is the other way around, is always synchronous. Let's talk a little bit about the new VS Code extension. Now that we know that we have a new runtime and that we have like two different types of logic apps, how do we implement those logic apps? So this is exactly where the new Visual Code extension comes in place, right? So now you have a place where you have a new designer experience where on Visual Studio Code, you can go and create logic apps visually like you would be doing in the portal, and actually better from what you're doing in the portal before, because they also revamp the design canvas. It allows you now for local execution, so which means that you should be able to get your logic apps and run fully disconnected to a point, right? Depending on the type of logic app that you're doing, you could be running fully local. Even when you're doing connection using Azure connections, that is something that we're going to be talking later on. You can still run that locally. It's just going to be doing the calls to APIs outside in Azure. That gives you like a improved developer experience, because now instead of having to be in the portal and working on a production-like environment, after that exporting and then parameterizing and then pushing to another environment, you are working more like the kind of workflow that you would have to anything else, to a function, to a web app, to some code that you're running locally, right? You have your code local, When you're happy with that, you push to a source control repository. From that is going to be triggering the process. So the developer, the application developer and the integration developer are going to be much more on the same basis of what they're doing than having two different experiences, which is going to make it a lot more straightforward to share that kind of information. And because of that, you also have a simpler packaging. What you have is like an Azure Function shell, for the lack of a better word, that we already know pretty much how to deploy. And everything for that set of logic apps is going to be embedded on that. It's not that if I have 5 logic apps, each one of them is an individual ARM template that then I have to combine and do something. I already have an unit of deployment that is my workflow app or logic app preview, for the better of a better term. I don't think they kind of close on the name of that yet, but you have a unit of deployment now for a group of logic apps that are part of a solution, compared to what we had before, which is like individual logic apps that you have to extract, combine, to then publish to other environments. And all of that is centered in the workflow project, right? This workflow project is exactly what puts all of those components together. So how is that a workflow project structure? You have two main or two general configuration settings, and then for each logic app, you have its own configuration setting, right? So you have a hosts.json that identify like the generic settings for the workflow app, which is similar to what would be the settings for the function app before. But then you have a new a file called connections.json that is where you store any of the connection information, especially the ones that are required to connect to Azure. So that's where it puts all the connection information for that workflow application, which means that you still have the ability, for example, that between workflows share the same connection, right? For example, for service bus, I don't have to create a new connection for each one of the workflow. I can still use the same workflow connection, the same service bus connection in each one of my workflows inside of that project. And then each one of the logic apps becomes a folder, and inside of that folder, you have the workflow.json that contains the workflow definition language that we know and love or not, depending on how much you like JSON. But that definition still exists and is inside each one of the workflow, each one of those workflow.json. That file is going to be quite important because we're going to be interacting with that file later on to open the designer, to see the runtime properties of a logic app, and sometimes to also see history and things like that. So keep an eye on that workflow.json. Before we go and explore the logic apps extension itself, I found that diagram in one of the documents that has been posted recently, and that kind of explains how the workflow runtime works, right? So I'll try to use that to explain that a little bit, but if I don't do a really good job of that, there is still the document that you can go and read, and I have a reference later on. So when you execute a a workflow app, right? What it does is you have a component called workflow event listener that creates a listener for each one of the logic apps that you create. So basically, this is where your triggers transform either in webhooks or recurrence processes and things like that. That's workflow event listener is responsible for that. When one of those logic apps that's being listened by that workflow event listener is triggered, then you find on the workflow interpreter all the actions and pass it to that workflow action job sequencer. So what that job sequencer does is actually get the logic app, understand the dependency between each one of the actions, and create kind of a graph of that. So that graph then interacts with the workflow orchestration engine, and that graph puts information for a stateful logic app into Azure Storage Queue. So for each one of the actions, you have an entry on a queue that you're going to be dealing with. And the workflow job dispatchers actually goes and then pick up one of those, executes, and then put it back the results until all the actions on the job sequencer for that graph has been evaluated and executed. And during the execution, that's where they use the actions function runtime to then run the either the HTTP calls or the things that are associated to that to the external or to the internal items. Right? It might be clear as mud, and it's really hard to explain that without seeing people either nodding or looking kind of strange at you. But hopefully you get an idea of how the new logic apps is kind of leveraging from the function runtime and from some of the ideas that they already had on the big components to execute it at a kind of a micro scale now that is the function runtime itself. So I already talked a lot, right? Let's take a quick look of how the VS Code extension works. So what I'm gonna do is I'll go to get into VS Code. And before we spend some time on the logic apps itself, let's see if you don't have that installed yet, where can you find the extension? So if you come to extensions and search for logic apps preview, that one here, right? So that logic apps preview is the one that we are using for the VS Code extension. And seems like it just installed a new update on that. So that's going to be kind of fun. It reminds me the old days of logic apps where the whole thing would be changing when I was doing presentations. So fingers crossed, the demo gods are with us today. So, but if you see anything happening that is too crazy, now you know why, right? And once you install that logic apps preview extension, what's going to happen is now on your Azure tools, you're going to see this new logic apps preview. And from here, you can do a couple of things. Oh, a lot of things actually. You can create a new project. You create a new or workflow inside that project. And you can deploy to a logic app in a workflow. I'm going to be calling that workflow app, but in the portal, you're going to find as a logic app preview component in Azure. We're going to take a look at that later as well. So now that we understand how you can run that, and before you're trying to create something too crazy, let's take a look how one of those workflow projects looks like, a logic app preview project looks like. So on that one, what I have is 4 logic apps. I have a simple stateful local, a simple stateless local, a simple stateful using Azure connectors, and a simple stateless using Azure connectors, right? So we have all of those 4 logic apps here. We also have the connections.json, we have the host.json, and we have the project that binds all of those things together. And the other thing that we have is also the local settings, so that allow us to be running locally. Okay. If I look at one of those logic apps, take a look at the stateful local, and right-click on workflow JSON, you're going to see a whole lot of things available here, right? You're going to see that I can get an overview of that function or that logic app. I can say I want this logic app to use connections from Azure. By default, it's only going to be using local connectors, unless you specify during the creation. You can open in design, which is going to be doing now, right? And then after that is like a whole lot of things related to the normal Visual Studio Code. So if I click on that one and open in design, and that new installation didn't break things, let's see what's going to happen. So it starts workflow design. The first time it can take a little bit of time. You see that is based on a new component called OmniSharp with this kind of mini server here. And one of the things that I'm going to give you as a little bit of advice, all of that is running, but it's based, the function runtime is based on the storage, a storage account, right? And when you're running locally, it's using the storage account emulator. I spent, I don't know, almost 1 hour the first time that I was trying to open that, and it was giving me errors and on top of errors on top of errors. Then I find out that 1, I didn't have the storage emulator installed, and 2, my storage emulation was not running. So it requires a kind of a specific version of the storage emulator, right? And that storage emulator needs to be running. Okay, so that would be kind of a friendly advice when you starting that, or making sure that your storage emulator is running automatically when you're doing stuff. Well, so now we've seen something that we never saw before, apart from all the demos that the Microsoft team already did from Ignite until here, but which is logic apps running as a designer inside Visual Studio without requiring connecting to Azure or anything like that. Everything that one is doing is purely local, right? So I have like when an HTTP is received, create a variable and responds. That is a really complex logic app. And the first thing you're going to notice here is when I click it on the when HTTP is received, it opens this nifty properties tab, right? Quite similar to what we used to see on Visual Studio in the old days when we're designing good old forms, where the properties table was there for us. And that's kind of the similar things that you're going to do here. So on that, we're going to have like the parameters. So everything that you needed to configure either on that trigger or action. You're going to see some settings and depending on the component, you're going to have some different things, but that one is particularly useful because this is where you define the settings for the logic cap itself, since that is a trigger. We're going to see the code view, so it actually shows like the kind of like the peak code in the old one. And the other thing that is really cool about that one is that about is actually showing the connection and showing any nodes of the operation, right? So that one of the things that the Microsoft show is sometimes, depending on the type of connector that you're using, the icons are quite similar. And here on that's about is going to have a whole lot of more information about what is the connector that you're using and all of that. If I get a little bit more space here, you're going to be able to add some kind of comment. This is a local triggered logic app, right? And when you do that, the comment now appears as a tooltip here. So from understanding or from documentation point of view, the comments and things are becoming quite useful. Okay, so because you can see it from here. If I needed to run that, the only thing that I need to do is just go to run. I'll do run it without debugging, right? Because I don't think at this stage debugging is in place. And when you do that, show the terminal. What is my terminal?
That's something I was trying to figure out the other day, is how you set a breakpoint.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't find that yet. View as well. Might need to talk to those guys. I'll just open the terminal here and look into the outputs for the Logic Apps preview. And I'm going to start that again just to show the things running. Okay, so when you're running that, right, it's basically, as you see, is doing the builds and then running just like a normal function, right? The func host start. So building, building, building. And then after that, it shows that I have 4 functions, and each one of those functions has those triggers. Okay. Then if I wanted to actually execute that, I spent another good half an hour yesterday and before trying to find as well. That link here is not going to work yet because it doesn't have the API version, doesn't have the signature, all the kind of stuff that we used on the other ones, right? But if you wanted to find the item that or the trigger for the logic app, you just needed to come to that overview page. And when you click on that overview page, what is going to show is both the trigger endpoint, but also you're going to see all the executions that you already did. So it pretty much works like a mini version of the Logic Apps portal overview page, right? If I get that and put into Postman, basically the Logic Apps receives a name and a comment and do kind of a hello world, right? Super extremely exciting. And there we go. Hello, Wagner. The comment was, this demo works. So just to prove that we don't have something pre-cooked, I say this demo is now for Integration Downunder. I can't type anymore. There. So if you go back to Visual Studio Code and do a refresh here, you see the last one was yesterday, right? You should have like a couple now. And we have two of them. And if I wanted to look at the information, what that actually happened, you can just copy the item on the run history and click it here. And it's going to be show you the items. Okay. And we're going to see the same thing that we saw before, like pretty much like we see on a logic app. Okay. How long each one of those took to run and all of that. So this is how you create and run those logic apps. If I wanted to create a new logic app, what I need to do is from here, from the function, I can go and say create workflow. Is always going to put the workflow on the current project and say this is like integration Downunder demo. This is the name. Just a minute. I think I did something wrong here. Yes. First, I need to select which one of the work types of workflows I wanted to run. I want to run a stateless, create a stateless workflow or a stateful workflow. So I'm going to create a stateful for now. Now I give the name. Sorry. And then after it does that, it shows me the workflow.json. And if I go here, now I should have a integration Downunder demo folder with the workflow JSON inside. And if I open in Designer, then there we go. And I have the Designer. So at this stage, this workflow is only using built-in connectors, right? There's nothing on Azure yet. But I can say use connectors from Azure. So, and then it's going to enable that. The first time that you do that for a project is going to ask you for where is the resource group and what is the subscription that you needed to associate to that. Okay, so in a minute, I'm going to create a new workflow project just to do that. Maybe we just do that now. So let's close this. Close the folder. All right. Then from here, let's create a new project. Then it's going to ask me where I'm going to be putting this. And I would say there is a new folder called Integration DU Downunder demo 1. Integration Downunder demo 1. And that's where you're going to be putting that. And what is the template that I wanted to use to that? Is a stateful or a stateless one? I'm going to create a stateful one. And this is my integration Downunder demo workflow. Open that in the current window. So it created all those things that we saw, the host.json, the integration Downunder demo workflow, right? And right now, there is no connections yet because it didn't create any connections. But if I go now and say use connectors from Azure, it's going to say enable that. Yes, use connection from Azure. Where is the subscription that I want to use? Where is the resource group that I'm going to be putting that? Going to try to create a new resource group here, and the name of that is Integration Downunder Demo 1 on Australia East. So now it created that, and that means that the Azure connections are enabled for the project. If I come here for that one and open the designer, once it opens, what I can do is I can search in Azure for it's not a logic app without a Twitter, right? Let's see what we have here. We should. Yes, it's not a logic apps without a Twitter. So when a new tweet is posted, use the default share application, sign in. If I still remember. There we go. So it's creating. Okay, so it created the connection, and in a minute we're going to Azure to see where that connection has been created, right? And search for hash integration DU. When that happens, then just add that to compose. Just put the original tweet there. Extremely complex, that logic apps. So I'll let you guys see if that's working. And what you need to do is create a Twitter with hash integration underscore DU, right? So if I go and run that, and get the overview, let's see what's happening.
One other thing I noticed this week while this is running is that you can now and I don't know whether this was before or not, you can create a Logic App preview in the portal, and it asks you for an app service plan, either a premium function hosting one or a normal app service plan, and it has that workflow in it, and allows you to create a stateful or stateless workflow in that running in an app service plan.
Yeah, that's the it just came. That error here, it was one error that I found it yesterday, and don't ask me why, but what I find out is there is an error on probably, I have the impression that it's just on my machine, right? But if I go to the project and I add a specific entry here on the property groups that are going to get from the other project, because I don't remember, then that starts to work. That is related to different between the .NET Core applications that we're using or that I have in store, and the .NET Core that the function is using. So I was not planning to show that, but it was good that it happened, because at least I can show you that detail as well. So if I come to
that identity is what's used for MSI and stuff like that. So they must be doing something under the covers with that.
So okay, so on that one here, you see I needed to include that function skips clean out. Have no idea what that means, but it was the magic bullet.
That doesn't seem.
Yeah, and notice that is not just that, but it's like underscore functions clean out.
Yeah, no.
Right? It's like it's a beauty. And I'm just going to stop that. Save and run without debugging. See if it's going to, oh, there we go. I'll stop.
The other interesting thing I saw when you created as an app service plan, it's asking you to connect App Insights. So I'm wondering, when it's running as an app service plan, is it going to send to App Insights instead of Log Analytics?
It actually does, and that saved me yesterday, and I'll show you why. I need to cancel that one somehow. Fail to stop previous running function. It's beautiful. So Control C. Yes. Thanks God for Control C. It is still universal. Let's try now.
Yeah, as silly as it seems, it is. And I also noticed when I went to try to create a new instance of App Insights, it was prompting me whether I wanted Classic or Workspace. And if I did Workspace, I had to specify a Log Analytics workspace.
That's a new thing on App Insights. But see, now that one is running, and if I go to the overview of that demo workflow, let's see if there is anything in the history. So are you guys going to be putting something silly on Twitter, or should I?
I just did.
Okay, let's say 15 seconds. With integration, hashtag integration _DU?
Yep, both the hashtag and the handle, because I wasn't sure which one you were using, but I waited until it was running before I sent it, but I don't know if It's a delay before it can pick it up.
Yeah. So let me try. And come on. And this is me doing silly demos with.
Is the hashtag case sensitive? Because I
Twitter
think I had a.
again. We're going to find out now, right? Because
Yeah, because
I copy and paste.
I use the capital I, so.
Yeah, I was playing in the Bash Cloud shell all day, and the number of things I had to retype because I typed the wrong case was not fun.
Let's
good old iPhone.
Let's try to go to the overview and refresh. No, didn't pick up.
I wonder if it's at the overview log. It takes a few minutes to catch up to the actual runs.
Not really, because of the that one is actually the going and running the trigger on a regular basis. I think if you go to outputs and that is Logic Apps preview. That was before, right? So it's
so while we're waiting, I'll just confirm. Your Logic app is actually running on your machine, but the connectors are running in the cloud. So if for example, if they did enable debugging and I got that working, you could debug locally even when you're using connectors that are in the cloud.
Yeah, because of the
awesome.
If we go back and I'll show you the in this case, let's abandon that one. That is the demo god's not being with me. So if I go and open that one, right? Where we have this this set here, I have this simple stateful Azure, and if you look at that one, what it does is one of my other silly demos. Just wait a little bit. It's coming. There we go. So I send a comment. I detect sentiment. If depending on the sentiment, it gets a blob and respond, right? So if we run that one, you're going to see that the thing is actually local. I think I messed up with that one. Delete the whole thing. Yes, please. Better. It's because I end up with one inside the other. Come on, because that's the last thing that I think I'm going to show since it's already 10 o'clock. So if we open the overview on that one and actually do that call, see, it is an HTTP localhost. And if that's still working, It's calling sentiment analysis. Depending on sentiment analysis, it goes to either one of the blob storages and come back with an image.
Very good.
So all of that, right? And it's like,
but that's just going to make life so much easier being able to do this locally.
exactly.
And
And
I can't wait. I can't wait for the debugging to be able to look at some of the variables.
That's true. See, so
Yep.
all of that is working. And if you look at the overview on that, it's a bit too much. It's actually, you start locally, call the text sentiment on the cloud, did the evaluation locally, get the get blob and send the response.
Very nice.
And as Bill was saying, if you go to the portal, which was one of the last other things that I wanted to show you. You now have the ability to run that same thing on the cloud, right? As what is calling a logic app preview, right? For me, it's like a workflow app or a logic app on function.
Stuart commented that he loved the sentiment demo returning a blob.
Yes, that's a classic. We're not going to get rid of that for a while yet. So if you come, you can see workflows running here, and I got like all those same workflows deployed to the cloud, right? All those other things that I had, I deploy to the cloud. And what I call in local and Azure is using either the built-in or the Azure connections. But if I look at that things on that resource group is where is creating the API connections.
Yep.
And it also, as you said, Bill, creates the Integration Downunder demo. And that was actually what saved me yesterday when I was running into some problems with my logic app, right? I had a stateless logic app that on that logic app, I had an error because I didn't enable the run history locally. It was failing, and it just gave me like an error that I couldn't understand. It was actually saying I couldn't save stuff somewhere.
Yep.
Because it's probably trying to save the error into a storage, and I was not able to. Then what I did, I pushed that to the cloud. And because I had the application insights enabled, then I could actually see the error. And it was like just the normal application insights other things. I start to run, I put on failures, I find the failure, and I say, hey, this is supposed to be, that was supposed to be decimal, and you put in string, and then I find the error based on that instead of seeing only the run. So that is also quite powerful. You get the ability to run the things with more performance. But the performance part is something that I'm still trying to understand exactly how much it is affected. I had a set of questions to the product group. I was hoping that they reply, but that I sent it yesterday at midnight, right? So didn't give them enough time to reply. But just the ability to have application sites, that is already a huge gain. Having all the errors in the same place for me is already a game changer.
Yeah, but that's part of what they're trying to do with this new workspace-based application insights. You're going to be able to query the application insights and the log analytics stuff in one query.
Mm-hmm. So that might alleviate some of that as well.
Yeah, they're trying to get down to a single Azure monitor from the two that they've got.
Mm-hmm. While we are here, the only other thing I want to show you, and I know I keep saying it's just this one, but that's a promise that is the last one, is what is it? On the Integration Downunder demo, if we go to the app service plan, right? The app service plan that you're running for that one is a premium Azure Functions premium app service plan. This EP1, and that's the only thing that you needed to understand right now, is that you're not able to just run on pure consumption of with this one. It's most probably is going to require a premium.
But the interesting thing was, I was just able to spin one up on instead of a consumption-based premium, I was able to spin it up on a free app service.
Ah, I didn't try that. That's a cool one, yeah. So you can create a free app service plan, and then it's give you like your another thing that a lot of people request. That is a free development environment.
Yep. And so basically, the only thing is you don't get like the custom domains and things like that. But
for development, you don't care about that.
Yeah. So it saves you that EP1 cost.
Yes, 250 a month, right?
Yeah.
Although yes, for production, 250 a month is going to be quite okay for most people.
Yep.
It's kind of a departure from running peanuts.
Yeah,
for some of those logic apps, but they give you a whole lot of different other options.
Better than paying for an ISE, that's for sure.
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
Well, because the other thing is that this is all going to run in container too.
Mm-hmm.
So
you can move to a app service for a web app for container. That would be a different, a smaller cost. So you're going to have a whole lot of different ways to slice and dice costs.
Yeah, so
that's for sure.
It's definitely a big step. And the example I saw, if you scroll up there a little bit on the left side there,
mm-hmm.
See where it says
sorry, that's an app.
Go back. Yeah, go back to go back to there. That's the resource group. Back into your app, this preview. When I saw it first demoed, there was workflows and functions.
Mm-hmm. Right?
In the same window.
Yeah, I think they're going to be they might be concentrating that, and I remember seeing that as well, like a mix of those.
Yep. I just don't think they want to muddy the water at the moment with the preview. They just want to make it just the workflow stuff. But that's going to be an interesting thing, because if I can get I've got functions out there and I want to run some logic apps, and I can put them into a premium app service plan, consumption app service plan, get all my networking features there for my endpoints and my VNet connectivity.
Yeah,
it just makes everything a lot easier.
Yes, the cool thing about doing as the same app is that you take care of networking in one go. Yep. But you should already be able to run on the even if you wanted to do separation of concerns and have the function on its own app and the logic apps on its own app,
just sharing
able to share the same app service plan. So from a cost point of view, is not going to have an impact.
Yep.
And again, like is another way that you choose how you slice and dice, right? You might have a requirement where your functions need VNet connectivity, your app services shouldn't. Then you can have it separated. If you needed both of them, you can at this stage configure on both of them. Who knows if later on they're going to allow both of them to coexist, and that is going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, the one comment I got today from somebody is they said they forced us to use a logic app or a function app with a timer, but logic apps are a whole lot easier to kick off timer events.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can put them together and you got some timer stuff that you want to do, just stick it out there as a logic app inside of the same app as your functions if you want.
Yes, that is going to be quite powerful. This bit here is the bit that I really interested.
Yeah, well,
right?
that whole hybrid networking with private endpoints and service endpoints is really, really interesting.
That is going to be a game changer.
I think we better try to call it a night.
Yes. So if I come back here, the next thing was exactly the updates on the portal, right? So it's like showing the preview, and it's the same experience that we just had. I could go and create the things. It uses Functions Premium Runtime, but as you said, is also allow you to use an app service plan. And I never thought about just using a free app service plan. That is just genius. Thanks for the tip, man. Then that's the end of the presentation. What I have is now a bunch of references, right? So those pictures that I get about the Logic Apps runtime and how the runtime processing and how the workflow the workflow project is set up is coming from this Logic Apps runtime deep dive on tech community. I create a bit.ly for that to make your life easier. So it can just go to bit.ly/LA deep dive. A little bit more about the code extension info itself, you can find on this https bit.ly/LA VS code. And I think if that one is the one that has like a whole lot of tips on how to install and how to troubleshoot some of the issues. I'll double check that. And there is also a good one about the stateless versus stateful. That is from where I got most of that information around which one is what you can do with stateless, what you can do with stateful, and how they work when they nested together. Okay.
So we got one question. Just somebody had said that the free app service plan has 60 compute minutes limit, I think. So you may need to select a shared or a basic plan. You can stay within your MSDN credits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Just depends on how much you're doing, really.
Yeah, it depends on what you're going to be doing on that one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but the hopefully when they get ready to release it, it'll be on the full consumption plan. It won't be an issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any questions? If not, I think.
Yeah. So Stuart just said that. And I can see any other questions on the. Yeah, I don't see any other questions, so I think we can close.
Yep. So thank you very much for presenting tonight. And what we're going to do, just another thing we're going to do, I think it's the 10th of December, which is the second Thursday of December. We're going to do an open mic. I've already got confirmation from one of the newest Logic App team members, who she's based in Melbourne at the moment. She'll be moving to Redmond eventually, but she'll be coming along to that event too to introduce herself to the community and to get along with everybody else. So looking forward for that December event. So thanks everyone for attending tonight. And that is pretty much our meeting. Thank you very much.